Meanwhile, we've got a terrible event which took place in this continent on the 7th of November in Amsterdam, when Arab men assaulted Israeli soccer fans who'd come to the city to watch Maccabi Tel Aviv play Ajax Amsterdam. In a pre-planned attack, groups of men chased and beat up the Israelis. Some of the victims were humiliated and made to say "Free Palestine" before they were beaten up. On instant messaging groups, perpetrators used the term Jew hunt, while Muslim taxi drivers played a key role in directing the rioters to where the Israelis were. The assaults happened on the eve of the anniversary of the 1938 Kristallnacht pogroms, which were really the launching pad for the Holocaust. And there are fears in the Jewish community of another Holocaust coming. An Orthodox rabbi from the Netherlands called on the country's Jews to immigrate to Israel immediately following the assaults in Amsterdam, accusing the Dutch authorities of failure to address the root causes of the incident. Villegas Henriquez said, "We inhabit a new demographic reality which simply cannot be changed, not with the current political class. The new demographic reality means large numbers of Muslims living in our cities. Prepare to make Aliya. Talk to your children or grandchildren, explain to them that there really is no future here. Help them study Hebrew and take all the necessary steps to make the move to Israel possible." So a calling for people to uproot from Europe and go to Israel, coming from the Jewish people themselves. Geert Wilders, the leader of the Party for Freedom, the country's largest party and member of the ruling coalition, called the incident in Amsterdam a pogrom, as did the Israeli President Isaac Herzog. He said, "First the Jew hunt, now an intifada." Demanded that all the perpetrators be deported. Wilders said that the disturbances were fresh examples of the failure of Muslims to integrate into Dutch society and uphold its norms, as well as of their anti-Semitism. In the neighbouring Belgium, the MP Philippe de Winter told Parliament that the anti-Semitism Europe faces is not an isolated phenomenon, but one inherently tied to Islam. He described the Quran as the root cause of this hatred, calling it a manual of anti-Semitic ideology that fuels violence against Jews and non-believers alike. The Quran is a long succession of anti-Semitic passages which call for Jew hunts and violence against unbelievers. This is not about a few extremists, it's about an ideology itself, one that teaches hostility towards Jews as a fundamental principle. He said Europe must wake up to the reality of this Islamic anti-Semitism, which is embodied in Islamic teachings. Failing to confront it will lead to the erosion of Western life, of Jewish life, European values, and the freedoms that define Western civilization. From that, you can come to a conclusion that Islam is part of the strong delusion. It's against Jews and it's against Christians. It's against the foundations of Western society. It's very much against Christians. You have to understand that Islam is not a religion which honors Jesus, although the Muslims will tell you they do. They honor him as a prophet, but he's not a prophet. He's more than a prophet. He's the Son of God. If you tell a Muslim that Jesus is the Son of God who died on the cross and rose from the dead, you will actually spark a antichrist reaction. I think I told you the other day about this incident we had when we got a taxi from Gatwick to our home, and we got a Muslim taxi driver, and I told him just that. And in the event, I was actually telling him that Muhammad is not the prophet, but Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. And frankly, he freaked out, and I was worried that he was going to crash the car on the M25 as we were rushing around at 70 miles an hour. And he said some very, very anti-Christian statements which he said to us. So don't believe this idea that we're worshipping the same God and that we have the same idea of Jesus. We have a radically different one. And if you look at it, the Islamic view of Jesus is one which is anti-Christ. It's denying the real person of who Jesus is. It fulfills literally the definition of antichrist which you give in John's letter about the relationship between the Father and the Son, denying it. Now, one of the problems is that I could already be in trouble if this gets broadcast, because we're seeing increasingly in our country that you mustn't speak against certain groups of people, including Islam and also the homosexual lobby. And we're seeing a kind of police state which is emerging in this country, in which you can't actually speak too much on this subject. But I'm going to speak about it anyway. Praise God. Before we get on to this country, I just want to say one other thing which is interesting, which I picked up from reading the US prophecy site called the Rapture Ready News, concerning the possibility of a peace settlement in Israel. I'll read you what he said. With the seeds of destruction already sown in America, the globalists already turned their attention to another nation they regard as an obstacle to their success, Israel. Why would they turn their attention to such a tiny nation? Because the one who guides and motivates them hates Israel and the Jewish people. Why is this opposition so intense and deadly? It's because Satan's ultimate goal is to eliminate both the nation and its people, so as to stop the fulfillment of Bible prophecy, as we read in Revelation chapter 19 to 20. Our adversary knows what Zechariah wrote about the second coming. He's returning to a repentant remnant of the Jewish people who will see the restoration of their kingdom during the time Jesus rules over the nations from the city of Jerusalem. If he can't defeat the nation militarily, might the devil be already working on a backup plan to destroy Israel and its people through peace? Days before the US election, 94 nations met in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, with the purpose of reaching a 7 to 10 year peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians, which they believe will bring peace to the Middle East. Both Israel and America sent representatives to this gathering, which calls itself the Global Alliance. Is a 7-year peace agreement ring any bells? President-elect Trump has also begun talking about reviving his 2020 peace agreement initiative along with the Abraham Accords. So we've got a movement towards a peace agreement in the Middle East. If so, it will be a huge step towards the fulfillment of Bible prophecy, particularly of Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, which speaks about a strong agreement which will maybe be made with many for a period of 1 week, which is 7 years, which will break down halfway through and lead to the abomination of desolation being placed in the holy place, which Jesus referred to in Matthew 24, which will then be the trigger for the Great Tribulation period and the second coming of Jesus to the earth. So it's kind of interesting that they're talking about a peace settlement for 7 years. They're also talking about how to do this. That's to divide up the land and give one part to the Palestinians and one part to the Israelis, to divide Jerusalem and to create a Palestinian state, which will then bring peace. Other interesting prophecy in Zechariah chapter 12, it says that the nations of the world are going to focus on this area and Jerusalem is going to be the burdensome stone burdening all nations. So something going to happen over Jerusalem which is going to focus the attention of the nations and bring to pass some kind of a peace agreement. What they want to have is a division of the city between the Israelis and the Palestinians, maybe some kind of a international control over the holy places, I don't know. But there's some idea of bringing some kind of a settlement to that area, involving a division of the land. Joel chapter 3 speaks about God being angry at the nations for dividing up my land. And that's an event which also in Joel leads to the final battle of Armageddon. That'll break down halfway through and lead to the time of sudden destruction. So question, are we leading towards that? Could that be going to happen? Will President Trump have something to do with it? Don't know. But it's interesting he's come on the scene and he has a plan also to be working towards a peace settlement. Probably Trump's not going to great help to the world government agenda. I think as I gave a talk a couple of weeks ago on some of the aspects of President Trump, I won't say all that again, but just to mention one or two things which are relevant. Before the election, Yuval Harari, who's actually an Israeli, who's a key leader in the World Economic Forum, which is not a good organization, which is working on the World Government Plan, he said that a Trump win would deal a death blow to their efforts. Their plan, which is a world government, is one of the biggest illusions of our time, by the way. It can only be achieved through some kind of dictatorship, a control system backed by high tech, which will lead to the Antichrist society of Revelation chapter 13. Archbishop Carlo Vigano, who's a conservative Catholic, and an opponent of Pope Francis congratulated Donald Trump's victory in the US elections, deeming it a divine intervention against the criminal New World Order. So the New World Order is actually a coming together of the World Economic Forum's Great Reset Programme, the United Nations Agenda 30, which involve various international agreements like the Climate Change Agreement, the UN Migration Pact, and the World Health Organization's Pandemic Treaty, working towards a development of a central bank digital currencies backed by a digital ID system imposed worldwide to bring the economic and social policies of nations into line with a central global authority. Would that be a good idea? Probably not. And Donald Trump's MAGA Make America Great campaign actually wants to put America first and stop this from happening. But if they have this plan, they're going to continue with it, despite Donald Trump. And some people say the plans are already in motion and they can't be reversed. I don't know whether that's true or not, but there is definitely an agenda which some say Trump is going to come against. Now, going back to Rapture Ready News, they also said that there is something which could derail this as far as America is concerned. He says, actually, I doubt that the Trump victory can prevent these things from happening. He says, because of the economic Armageddon that's rapidly speeding our way. During the past 4 years, the US government has added $7 trillion to its debt total, which just reached $36 trillion. The US is adding $1 trillion to that total every 100 days, with interest payments on this debt now over $1 trillion a year. He says the restraining hand of the Lord is the only reason America has not reaped the disastrous consequences of this reckless financial mismanagement of the past few decades. The fast approaching train wreck will directly lead to Revelation 6:5-6, which is famine conditions throughout the earth. Besides the debt implosion that lies on the horizon, the multitudes of US enemies that have poured across the southern border, along with the estimated 10 million illegal immigrants during the past 4 years, pose a substantial threat to our nation's future well-being. Is there time to avert an eruption of violence within our borders? Personally, I think it's rather unlikely. In this case, Trump's plan to make America great again will fail, like other human efforts to save the world. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but these are just observations. This is from an American source. They're saying that America is facing an economic crisis which is going to derail Trump's attempt to make America great again. Could derail a whole lot of other things. Now, there are those who say this isn't the case. Actually, it's going to lead to the great Christian revival. I said about that last time when I spoke about the new apostolic Reformation leaders, saying it's going to be the start of the great end-time revival, which will bring the imposition of global Christianity on the world. A few people shaking their heads. I think this is another part of the strong delusion which is not going to happen. And the Bible actually teaches that in the last days there will be a crisis which will lead to the Antichrist forces taking control and suppressing biblical Christianity.